All right, welcome everybody. We'll just take a few minutes to let everybody sign in, and then we'll get started. Again, we'll just take a couple minutes here to let a few folks sign in, and then we will get going. Hopefully, everybody's having a great day so far, getting ready for the weekend coming up, and then we'll be learning a little bit more about quality and manufacturing just shortly now. All right, great. Let's get started so we can get to as many questions as we can here. So welcome everybody to the live Q&A on quality and manufacturing with Dragon Innovation. My name is Andrew Hall. I head up marketing here at Dragon. And of course, we have the man of the hour, Dragon Innovation Project Manager, Spencer Hartfeld. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really great, Andrew. Thanks for asking.
Great. So you want to just tell us about yourself real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from, my background in education is I got my mechanical engineering degree from Northeastern, and I've been Dragon Project Manager for just about 2 years now. And I got my start in the outdoor recreation industry, working on a bunch of different things for stoves, for tents, for kayaks, canoes, as well as other outdoor activities and outdoor recreation products. And I started out as a research and design engineer, and then eventually I made my way into the quality sector and headed up the quality program and built that from the ground up. So I have pretty deep knowledge for both domestic manufacturing, and we also had a large contingent of overseas manufacturing at the time, which involved a lot of my time going to China and working with Chinese factories and being involved in the community there as well. And I've also done a lot of different consulting for medical, including FDA, AAMI standards, and a few other things. And I've really been enjoying my time here at Dragon, and it's been great.
Excellent. Well, speaking of Dragon, why don't we just give you guys a quick little overview of who we are and what we do. So we're Dragon Innovation. So we are a team of manufacturing experts who partner with companies who are building complex products. So and need help with managing the new product introduction process. So we can help whether you're in the early idea or proof of concept phases with our educational resources, or things such as our early engineering sessions where you can get a good firsthand experience with one of our Dragon experts. And then all the way up to when you're ready to take that working prototype and choose the appropriate factory to work with or contract manufacturer for high volume manufacturing. So that's a little bit more about us and what we do. But what we would like to know is who you all are and what you are working on, what you're developing, and then what your role is. So I'm going to give a quick couple polls here to see what the audience is up to here. So I will launch the first one. So this is basically asking you about your current development of a hardware product. Fantastic. So we got about 83% of you are actively working on a product. So that's great. Next, we are going to launch our second poll. And so we just want to know what your role is at your company. I always find this fascinating to see who the audience is.
Mm.
Very interesting. Okay, great. So we have about 50% CEO founders, about a quarter of you are engineers, and then the other quarter of you are in operations. So that is very interesting and sounds like a great audience to to hear what we're going to be chatting about today.
Yeah.
So I will share those results and stop. And share these results and stop. And then we will get out of polling. Or how do we get out of polling? Let's see, poll is closed. Let's see. Oops. Sorry about that, everybody. Nope, I don't want to do that. There we go.
All right.
Apologies for the delay there. So appreciate everybody sending in questions. This is really helpful for us to understand what the different challenges people are experiencing, especially in these different stages of manufacturing. So we wanted to touch on quality because that seems like a common occurrence and a common topic that comes up frequently with our different prospects and customers that we work with. So we had a lot of great questions come in, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. So if we have time to take some more at the end, you can leave those in the chat bot or the chat section, and then we'll read them to Spencer live. But I'm going to get to these first ones that were submitted prior to signing up for the webinar. So we kind of broke it down into a little bit more general topics on quality, and then as you progress along in the manufacturing process and are actually in that ongoing production and working with a factory or a contract manufacturer, what those different challenges you might experience as it pertains to quality. So let's get into it. Are you all set?
I'm ready to go. Let's do this.
Excellent. All right. So starting off, what are some PCBA testing procedures, QA strategy, and process engineering challenges that people might have?
Fantastic. Great question. So first off, you have in-circuit testing for PCBA components. And this is essentially going down to each of the components and each of the sub-circuitry inside of the PCBA itself, and essentially cordoning that off and then just testing the components to make sure that that individual subset of the overall assembly is working properly, and you're getting with the correct inputs, you're getting the right outputs in terms of voltage, current, as well as just data transfer and everything else that goes along with it. And that usually requires a few different things, sometimes a small amount of pre-programmed testing protocols to confirm the component level performance. It also includes a flying probe or another type of probe testing, which is essentially you're taking a set of contacts and then cordoning off that specific component or that specific set of components on the board and just testing around there. And then you can also box test of components, which includes a bunch of different tests. You also have bed of nails testing, which also includes some level of force failuring of components as well. And this is always really good because you're going to be testing each of the sub-level components to the most extreme cases under the highest allowed current load possible. And really what you're trying to do is you're trying to break things in this instance and trying to see what fails first and how you can redesign and improve in that aspect. Automated optical inspection, you have 3D and 2D. 3D is pretty common nowadays, and it provides a very, very high level of quality in terms of inspections and very, very high consistency rates and being able to identify problems. X-ray is also another way to test PCBA components. Not usually as important. There's automated optical inspection is so good nowadays. You usually can get a lot done with just that on its own, and usually with a couple other subsets of parameters of testing. So X-ray is a little bit more old school, but also for finding problems inside of the board, it's a really great way to do that. Memory flashing and testing data transfer on memory or microprocessors, that's also another great way to test PCBAs too. A lot of different ways to do it, a lot of different things that are going to impact what type of testing you need to do. But this is a really basic top level overview of what you can do for PCBA testing.
Excellent. I feel like that that kind of summarized everything that I had questions on. So that felt very much covered there. Cool. So we'll hop into the next question here. So I think this is an issue that a lot of people are curious about. So does increasing the level of product quality necessarily mean increased cost to your manufacturing?
Yes. The question that everybody wants to know, how much is this going to cost me? Quality always does have some level of inherent cost, right? You have to pay for the extra testing, the extra test fixtures, as well as the manpower and the inspectors to actually do all this review work, right? But I think it also depends on how important quality is to you, where you are in your manufacturing process, and also what type of manufacturing control that you have. Are you using a contract manufacturer? Are you manufacturing in-house where you have much greater overall control? But there's always a few easy things that you can do that don't necessarily always have a high impact cost, especially with ensuring that you have really robust standard operating procedures and quality inspection documents and a quality manual. Those are all things, if you already have a quality team on staff, that you can help utilize and help use that team to build all of these, as well as redefining and looking at what your returns and your failures are in the field, and then just going back to the manufacturer and to your design and pinpointing, oh, we have a really high incidence of this problem in the field, or a really high incidence of repairs or rework that we have to do on the line, and just begin to dive right into those, because those big ticket items are always going to help bring down your overall management costs for the entire product and the whole quality management system as much as possible. So I always say, yes, it does have some amount of cost involved with it, but go after the big apples and go after the big items that are causing you headaches to help reduce costs and essentially see that recouping of costs on the back end as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think I've heard this, that you want to introduce this as early as possible so that you're not experiencing that later on down the line and having to put Band-Aids on.
Exactly, on all kinds of other things. So thinking about quality as early as possible is always key.
Excellent, cool. So speaking about putting together a team, someone wanted to understand what the different challenges or skills that you might need to overcome aspects of quality. So what skills or roles do I need on a team to manage quality when going from an aesthetic working prototype to a mass-produced final product?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And so you're really getting to the point where you're developing your team and you're building your whole team here. And I'm going to give an idealized situation of what you want to have. And this, I completely understand, working with many startups, working for startups. You aren't always going to be able to get all of these right away, because like I said before, all of these roles, they all have costs associated with them, and how good of people you're actually involving, of course, they all have salary ranges as well for the level of quality you're getting in a candidate for these positions. And all of this also kind of depends on your supply chain as well. Like I was talking about before, either you're outsourcing to a contract manufacturer or you're manufacturing in-house, and also the location, because you could be working with a contract manufacturer domestically here in the US, somewhere in North America, or you could be working somebody in China or in Thailand, Singapore, or even overseas in Europe. And that has a lot of effect too. First off though, you're always gonna need some level of quality manager. And the quality manager role, depending on the size of your organization, can really vary greatly. And usually you're going to have at least one quality technician, if not a quality engineer and a quality technician underneath you. And those all have different layers. A quality tech is really somebody who's going to be doing the incoming inspection documentation, writing up the inspection, and presenting that to the quality engineer and or the quality manager themselves. And so really the quality tech is doing all the groundwork and doing the measurements and checking what's happening on the floor. The quality engineer is kind of that next level up of overall process investigation and standard operating procedure writing, and also incoming inspection checklists and things like that. And they are really taking that handoff from the design aspect of the product development process over to the manufacturing, and they're going to be the real critical thinkers and defining what are going to be the big issues and what we really need to focus on in the manufacturing process. And then the quality manager is really managing the relationships with your factory, the relationship with operations and R&D, as well as any improvements that you can do as an overall top level for your QMS system. And they're really the QMS managers, where they're going to be managing the end-to-end process of the entire quality. And depending on the size of the organization, as I was saying before, the quality manager, if it's a smaller organization, may be doing a lot of the smaller, more menial tasks as well, doing the inspections and also writing the SOPs. And that can vary greatly, but in an ideal situation, you'll want all three of these to be able to intersect and be able to overlap the process as much as possible. And especially if you're working overseas, you're really going to want third-party inspectors as well, which is an outside organization like Dragon, who we can definitely help you go on site to your factory in China or somewhere else, do an on-site investigation before a shipment is sent out from the factory. So if there are problems, they're presented at the factory before shipment, and there's a couple implications there. You don't have to wait for 6 weeks to find a problem and then ship everything back, and that has all time and costs associated with it. There's never going to be a back and forth with you and your contract manufacturer about what was potentially a transportation problem, what was damaged upon at the manufacturing line, either in China or at your final assembly site. And also it affects your payment terms as well, where if you can stop that shipment early, then you're not going to be beholden to a 60 or 90-day payment term limits. And that just helps increase your overall cash flow as well. So it all has implications where it costs money, but you can also save yourself a lot of money in the long run. And that's the hope.
Yeah, excellent. So this is a little more generalized question. So what are some must-dos or priorities for quality with regards to, we're talking specifically consumer electronics?
So this is going to be pretty subjective depending on the product, and that even goes for within consumer electronics. Consumer electronics is very, very wide breadth of different types of products. You're going everything from very simplistic flashlights, which is technically consumer electronic, all the way up to AI systems, which are incredibly complex and have a lot of background and require a lot of testing and a lot of validation and a lot of certification as well. But I'm gonna, let's say for a middle of the road connected IoT device that essentially has a few different forms of functionality, maybe a screen, maybe some 3G capability as well. That's going to be kind of the idealized type of product that I'll be talking around here. So of course, there's going to be leeway on both sides. So we'll start off with durability testing. And durability testing is you're really testing what your product can do in terms of day-to-day use, in and out, and what the limits are essentially for your product in each of the subcomponents. And there's a lot of different testing, and Dragon can absolutely help formulating the entire overall test quality plan that will define all of your durability testing that you need to do. Life testing is the next aspect of it. And really what you're doing in life testing is you're going to be looking at essentially everything that could possibly happen in a warranty period. So depending on the product and how long of a warranty you want to have, the amount of testing is going to vary greatly. For lower end product, as I mean, you may be talking about a 1 year warranty term, maybe even less. Sometimes it's only 30, 60, 90 days. And then for other more high end products, you're going to be talking about 2, 3, 4, 5 years of warranty periods. And so it's going to be testing some of these items to failure, how long a specific subcomponent, so let's say a screen, when does the screen die, how long does it take to die, how many pushes it can survive before it causes problems with pixelation or the capacitive touch starts to go bad, as well as lighting, connectivity of Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. It's testing all of those for multiple warranty returns. So usually for these, you're talking about testing for 10,000 to 100,000 cycles, which all takes time, and usually you can run it automated and have it run through the night. And so hopefully you can cut that time down, but that's really the key there. Then you have your PCBA testing, which we kind of already talked about a little bit as well. So I won't touch too much on that. Aesthetic testing is really looking at not only the look of it, but also the feel, the weight, how it interacts, any stains, any flashing, any discoloration, any flaring on fabrics that come up that are clearly problems and would not look good in a consumer's hand. And so we're talking about, and that depending on the size of the product, it can really vary from, I mean, you're looking at scratches that are either 5 millimeters or 50 millimeters long, and what is critical, major, minor in terms of the problems with this aesthetic testing and just overall review. And this also includes packaging, which I think a lot of people forget about, because the packaging is almost just as important as the product.
Yeah.
Verification and validation, or V&V, you're really testing that the product is working to the predetermined function and the predetermined requirements for the product itself. And so you're really making sure at this stage, which usually involves your EVT, DVT, PVT stages, and all the sampling that goes along with that as well. This is where you're making sure that the product is doing what it's supposed to do, and that it is doing it well and is doing it accurately. And this is really the stage that what you're telling customers this is going to solve and what your product is actually doing, this is where those two areas really marry each other. And finally, certification testing. And for consumer electronics, you're going to have a wide range of different types of certification testing that you have to do for either FCC, UL, CE, which is all dependent upon the markets that you're going to and what type of features your product has, because they all have different requirements.
Great. So back into that earlier stage aspect of manufacturing, and starting to talk a little bit more about DFM. Is quality a consideration in DFM, especially if you've chosen a CM already, or should it be completed as part of the process and it's too late?
DFM is in building quality into your design is something that you can always do. There's always the availability to reiterate and redesign. It also always has cost implications, especially if you've already cut tooling and you're talking about touching one of those tools, and that all has cost implications, of course, but you have to do the cost comparison and really investigate on your own with how much are you currently paying for this problem in terms of returns and damage to your brand, as well as in terms of just management of that overall process. You really have to begin to figure out how much you're paying for that and whatever the cost to redesign something, both in manufacturing and on the R&D side and the validation of the design. You have to do that cost comparison, because the problem will never get better. Especially if it comes to it's not going to solve itself. It's not going to solve itself. And so the problem is not going to go away, especially if you don't have good agreements and a good relationship with your factory. So in my opinion, you can always do DFM. And I think that that's probably a little bit of a loaded comment, because there's going to be a lot of implications for operations for everybody. And I've worked both sides. I've worked R&D as well as quality and manufacturing and operations. So I fully understand that there's a give and take on both sides. So it's making a determination on, is it worth it for your organization to deal with this problem, and how serious is the problem? I mean, are we talking a stack problem, or we're talking a serious safety issue? So in terms of figuring out how to design for manufacturability more, if you haven't picked a contract manufacturer yet, this is a great time to begin to dive into that. But so often the manufacturability part of it, which Dragon can absolutely run DFMAs for people. We've done many of them, and they always have really, really great results. But there's always going to be changes too once you get to the factory that you're going to be working with, because their tool maker is going to have a certain way of doing things, their engineering team is going to have certain recommendations that you might not have thought of, that might have been overlooked in other steps. And so you're always going to be working on DFM, right? Because even when you get to the factory and you pick somebody, they're still going to have recommendations to make it easier for them so they can produce faster, and they can help increase your stock, and also can help increase their margins as well. And also essentially reduce margins for you too, for what you're having to pay to the CM, so you increase your cost too. So it's always a give and take, but you can do it at any time, and always be thinking about how can you change your design to improve the product and the quality oversight as much as possible.
Excellent. So one last question before we start talking a little bit more in-depth aspect of ongoing production. So do you have any advice on the preparation for UL and FCC certification?
So this is definitely another area that Dragon can help greatly. I have been dealing with certification for many years myself, both in many different markets and domestically, overseas. And probably the first thing is make sure what you need is FCC and UL, because I think that a lot of times it's thrown out. It's like, oh, you absolutely have to have these two things, but there's really big factors that come into play of if you even need to do FCC testing, whether it's an intentional or an unintentional emitter, depending on the frequency ranges that it falls into and the strength of that signal. That also has implications, and also for the UL as well. Are you buying your charger off the shelf? Are you making the charger yourself? Because that has big implications if you're responsible for the UL testing, or the manufacturer that you're white label buying a charger from instead. So I think that the first thing is really make sure that this is the testing that you need. There are a few different notifying bodies that are certified worldwide to be able to do this testing and be able to actually provide a certification based upon this testing. And there are multiple different partners that Dragon can help identify, and there's benefits to ones over others depending on what type of testing you need and the location of where you're going to be testing, because some testing facilities inside of organization, these notifying body organizations, are much better than others, and I would definitely recommend certain testing locations over others depending on what you're trying to do. And once you've made a determination on the actual certification that you're going to need, begin to look at the testing standards that they outlined in that, and try to recreate that situation at home or at your factory or at your design location to as close as possible, and test in-house before you send product out to be retested at a certifying body. Because essentially what's going to happen is that if you don't know if your product's going to pass or not, most likely, I don't think I've ever seen a product pass without any testing on the first time. It usually comes back as a failure. And it could be for a whole bunch of different reasons. Either it fails a Faraday cage test, or you're emitting outside of a certain range for either FCC Part 15, B, or C. And if you can do all of this testing beforehand and basically have 100% confidence, or as close to 100% confidence that you can, before sending that to a UL certified test laboratory or an FCC certified test laboratory, it's going to reduce costs for you, even though it seems like you're wasting your time trying to do this testing where you're going to just be paying somebody else, because it's not their job to tell you how it failed. It's going to tell you it failed here. I don't know how you're going to get it into compliance, but that's your problem. It's not the notifying body's problem to figure out why and how you're going to get into compliance. So you really need to make sure that you're doing that testing on the front end, so that you're not getting ahead of yourself and designing something in that is going to fail when you get to the prototyping or the pilot production stage. And then you have to go back and either retool components, bring in new components, and retest all of those components. And I mean, you can be talking about months of delays at that point, especially if you don't do any of this testing beforehand. So I say test as early as possible, make sure you get the certifications that you need, and follow the certification procedures and the testing procedures to the T.
Excellent. All right, so we've gone through the earlier stage processes of quality. the certifications leading up to having that working prototype or starting to do those pilot runs. So we're going to start to ask questions, or some of these questions are more geared towards once you've selected a contract manufacturer to work with or a factory, what are those relationships with quality and how you can handle them. So speaking to that first question, what is the relationship between quality and factory testing?
So quality and factory testing are actually pretty synonymous. Really, in terms of the factory testing, it's all quality testing at the end of the day, and in process quality inspections and quality process checks. So I think that in terms of how your organization, your quality team is interacting with your factory's quality team, I think it's really, really important to make sure you have 100% alignment. And this goes beyond just making sure that you have a understanding of what testing is required and what the end goal is of all of this testing. It's also a relationship. I mean, because really you have to be able to trust each other, and you should always be running third-party shipment audit inspections just to make sure that you're covering yourself. But really, those should be more of a rubber stamp, because at the third-party inspection, everything should be coming back clear. And if you're having problems with that, then that shows that there's a much deeper problem, either in their organization and your organization, how you view quality, or how you really want to get to a better quality system. So based upon that, as you build your quality management, or as you build your quality plan and all of the testing that's associated with that, it requires a lot of back and forth with the factory quality team as well, because you want to make sure that the quality test that you're recommending is A, something that they can do, B, that they have the testing equipment provided, and C, that they actually understand the intent and why you want to run this test, because you saw failures in prototypes under these different conditions. And so that's why this test is so, so unbelievably important. But Dragon can absolutely help with 3D inspections. And actually, this is really a big part of Dragon too, where we can come in and we can help manage the relationship between your factory and yourselves, and help be on site to manage their quality team and make sure that testing is happening at the intended regular intervals, and that there's all of that testing is also being documented and being saved somewhere. So if you do have a lot problem and you have problems in the field, you can always go back and you have an easy way to go and identify problems.
Okay, I'm gonna actually jump to another question that actually you just sparked right there. So do members of the team need to be on site for manufacturing to maintain quality? And if so, how long?
I agree. That's a great question. And in all honesty, members of your team will have to be on site for some amount of time. I don't know how long that could be. It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a year, it could be 10 years. And that is totally dependent as well upon how long it's taking to onboard a new product, how long it's taking for that NPI process to really happen, depending upon the complexity of the product. If you're using some new and emerging tech that doesn't have a lot of manufacturability research done into it, then that's something else that basically you're creating an entirely bespoke process for a new type of product. So that is all going to have implications, and as well as the location, the reputation, and the cultural or language barriers of the factory. Let's use China for an example. There are a lot of different cultural differences between China and America, and not only just in terms of family and otherwise, but also in terms of business and manufacturing. Without being on site and being able to understand how they want to test something and the reasons for why they've been doing something and the historical data that they have, it's very hard to explain that over email. And in my opinion, 6 months of emails can usually be done with a week of being on site. And because of that, it's really important to always have somebody there outside of your team like a Dragon individual who can be there on site to be running inspections, to be running manufacturing and audit checks, and be sure that the quality is being kept on track, on schedule, and on target. And that's a really, really big part. Eventually, as time goes on and you create a better relationship and you begin to have more trust with your contract manufacturer, there might not be as much of a need for that eventually, but really it's in all those early stages where they're feeling you out, you're feeling the factory out. That's really where it's critical to have really, really good alignment and have a really, really good relationship with that factory to make sure that they're behind the product and they want to empower their quality team to actually do the testing and the procedure checks and follow the SOPs to a T, because then they believe in the product, they want to make money too, and then they're going to push to make sure that their scrap rates, their repairs rate, and their returns are as low as possible.
Excellent.
Long story short, yes, you do need somebody. Dragon can help.
Great. Well, the plug. Cool. We'll hop into a couple more specific questions, and we'll see if we have time for anything else after that. So how do you build production so that you are safeguarded against delays from one supplier, even if all other pieces are in place?
Safety stock. Safety stock.
Straightforward.
And because really, and if you're talking about you're only having an issue from one supplier, and sometimes it's because you can't get a component from anybody else.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the power is kind of in that manufacturer's hands, right? They're the ones calling the shots. So it can be a very difficult situation to be in. I've been in that situation before, and it can be extremely difficult. But really going back, creating a stronger relationship with that manufacturer may be one way, and talking about what your purchasing terms are, that can help as well. But at the end of the day, things can change quickly, especially even things that are geopolitical and completely out of any of our controls that have huge impact, or even somebody like, let's say Foxconn comes in and all of a sudden buys up all of their stock, and then they don't have anything for 6 months. What are you going to do? This is where safety stock is key. And yes, it does cost money to warehouse that somewhere, either at the factory or on-site at location, but it is much cheaper than not being able to produce for 6 months.
Yeah. Cool. So this is a little bit more specific question. So hopefully this will be relevant to a lot of other people as well. So how do I ensure that overmolding needles with plastic does not result in flash?
So this is really going to be something that you're going to want to be talking directly with the tool maker themselves, whether they're at your contract manufacturer or they're a sub-vendor of the contract manufacturer. In this specific case, it sounds like what you're talking about is that the tolerances on the two sides of the molds by one of the gating standoffs or by one of the injection areas is essentially not tight enough. And basically when the two parts of the mold come together, there's a little bit of space under the 500-ton press that's being pushed to insert as much liquid plastic resin as possible into the mold itself. Basically, you just have a little tiny piece, a little tiny area that does not line up completely, and it's being shot right up through that, and you kind of get that little thin tiny piece of flash. Really, that is a tool problem that the tool maker should fix on their own. But in process, that just needs to be a quality inspection check, probably at the aesthetic level. It might also have an interaction with another component, so it could be a mechanical problem as well. That's something that you just need to make sure that the people at the injection mold are checking for, and that they're either identifying the problem and telling the tool maker to fix it, or they're rectifying the problem right on site by cutting the flash off. And I think there's a handoff on how much the cost for each of those are. For either changing the tool, that can be very expensive sometimes, and it may be worth it just in the interim, just to implement a QC check now and be addressing the problem right at the plastic injection molder. Excellent,
excellent. So we're coming up on about 5 minutes here, and I'll just do one last question here, and I swear it's not a plant. So someone asked, can Dragon help with QC?
Yes, absolutely. So we have been involved with building quality plans really from the ground up. And that is everything from taking the overall requirements and features of your product and building an entire quality plan, an entire quality testing structure that is developed through working with a customer as well as the factory, or sometimes just with the customer if they have not found a factory yet, and essentially making alignment between what capabilities the factory has, what the customer needs, and what the features or requirements, and all of the extra input and guidance that Dragon has in terms of determining, oh, this could be a potential problem because your use case is XYZ. We can help identify those problems and even run accelerated live testing, which will essentially force failures and help determine some design for manufacturability and quality implications as well. So you can go back and redesign as needed, so you don't have these problems in manufacturing. We can also help through having on-site project managers, which will help manage the overall quality process. We can run shipment and audit inspections, so we can either run just individual shipment inspections or an entire factory audit or process audit, anything along those lines, and all of the deep industrial and industry knowledge that comes from Dragon and all of our experienced quality individuals.
Excellent, excellent. So, sorry, just to quickly define, what is QC for those of us?
Oh, it's quality control, excuse me.
No worries. So fantastic. So it looks like we're coming up on time here. I'm going to leave you all with some resources. So you can check out the Dragon Innovation website. You can check out our dragoninnovation.com/blog is our blog. You can just search quality. Then that will bring up a lot of different articles that will help go a little bit more in depth on some of these different topics that we've covered so far today. And then we have a whole quality page on our website that dives deep into each of these different subjects as well. So we recorded this webinar as well, so this will be sent around to everybody. So feel free to watch that over again if you need to listen to a question a little bit more in depth, or if you had to jump off and grab a bite to eat and missed a little bit of it, you can feel free to watch that as an afternoon video. So we'll be sending that out either at the end of this week or early next week. And then if you have any additional specific questions on quality, we're happy to help answer those specifically towards your issues or your challenges. So you can send us an email at help@dragoninnovation.com with any of those other specific questions. And then we'll hope for everybody to have a great weekend, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks a lot, Spencer.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right. Bye, everybody.